For a couple of weeks, I just want to talk to you about your importance, your value, and kind of the direction that I want us to go as we look. I know that we're already into the second month of 2020, but I want us to look ahead a little bit, and I want us to put a goal before us in the year 2020. So for a few moments this morning, let me just talk to you about the value of just one. One is a fascinating kind of a concept. If you look up one, it's the lowest cardinal number. I mean, they say one's the lowest cardinal number, and it's half of two. To which you go, duh, right? That whole kind of thing. But so one can be small, but one can be big, because I can come down to you and I can go, Terry, you're number one. And all of a sudden, one is a big thing, right? Or one can be just a small thing. Sometimes one is big, sometimes it's small. If you have a lot of money, $1 is small. But how many have ever been so broke that $1 was a lot of money, right? So sometimes one is big, sometimes it can be small. If you love pets, one dog can be amazing. If you hate dogs, one dog is a lot, right? You know? How many know that when you're married, one spouse at a time is plenty? Anybody with me on that one? Okay. Or how about this? When you eat Oreo cookies, how many know that one row? I was talking about one row. You thought one cookie. No, one row. So that whole kind of thing, you know. So sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. And the value of one can change depending upon the circumstances or whatever it is that we're talking about. But there's one thing that the value of it never changes. In fact, it has greater value than anything else that you and I could see with our eyes. And it's the value of a life. It's the value of a soul. It's the value of a person. Because every conceived individual is a child of God. And that child of God has so much value that God demonstrated his love for us individually. That while we were still in a state of sin, he sent his one and only, he sacrificed his son Jesus to hang on the cross and bear the consequences of sin for us. God did it. That God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only son, that whoever would put their trust and belief and faith in him would never die but have eternal life. That God would go to any length, any degree. He would do anything it took to gain a relationship with your soul, and he did. And it began with his son Jesus, but it goes far beyond that. You know what's amazing about this whole thing about God just wanting relationship and connection with our souls and with our lives and having a relationship with us? You and I have been invited to be a part of that whole thing in a couple of different ways. One is that we can individually, on our own, say yes to a relationship with him, to get connected with him. And then at the same time, once you say yes to him, now you become the conduit, the avenue, the means, the mode, the method for God to work on somebody else's life. Far be it from us to be possessive and selfish with our relationship with Jesus Christ. If you today claim to be a follower of Jesus, but you have never made an effort to share your faith story with somebody else, to get them into a relationship with God, what's the matter with you? Why wouldn't you do that? Because God has placed so much value on that soul. But God wants to work through us to make it happen. He goes after that soul because there's so much value in it. And I want you to know this morning, before we're done, that you have far more value and purpose than maybe you thought before you walked in the doors today. In fact, Jesus tells a really familiar story to us that kind of illustrates the value that God places on people. And he tells the story and illustrates it with sheep. Now, we don't know sheep really a lot, maybe in our culture. Maybe you've grown up with sheep. I never grew up with sheep. But he equates us with sheep, and the people that Jesus talked to in that day would understand the value of a sheep because it was your livelihood. And so Jesus tells this story in Luke chapter 15, verse number 4. He says, you know what, if a man, maybe, let's say he had 100 sheep, and just one of them gets lost. Jesus asks the question, well, what's he going to do? And all the people listening to Jesus tell the story that day, it was kind of obvious what they would do. But Jesus makes it really clear. He answers the question for him in the next verse. Verse 4, he says, look, wouldn't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and then just go to search for that one lost sheep until he finds it? He doesn't search for it until he gets tired. He doesn't search for it until something else more important comes up on the agenda. He doesn't search for it until the big game comes on and then quits searching for it. He searches for the one until he finds it. And then only then does he quit. But he searches for it. And it's not that the 99 are less valuable than the one. It's just that when that one is lost, suddenly it has a greater priority. You might understand this. This is the heart of the Father. Understand the heart of the Father. If you're a parent in this place today, maybe you have been in a public place, you've been in a public place, and you have little children in tow. It might be one, you got Buford and Jess, just whatever, they're with you, wandering around in the public place, and you look down, and that child is gone. Mom and Dad, do you remember the panic that you felt in that place? Or maybe some parents are like, well, God bless whoever finds them. They can have them, right? You know, that whole kind of thing. But you know the panic. Now you're sitting in here going, Pastor, I'm not a parent, I'm single, I'm a student at school, I can't relate to that. So I thought about this illustration. Think of the feeling that you have the moment you realize you can't find your cell phone. That's how God feels when we're lost. He panics because he loves us. So verse 5 says, when he finds that one, he searched for it until he found it. And when he found it, he joyfully carries it home on his shoulders. You know what I love that? He doesn't take a stick and prod it and poke it in the behind saying, what were you thinking when you wandered away, you dumb sheep? He picks it up and he throws it on his shoulders and he dances, I found my sheep, I found my sheep. He starts celebrating even before he gets home. And he carries the sheep because the sheep has value. And he loves that sheep. And then it says that, verse number 6, when he gets home, he's going to call together all his friends and his neighbors, and he says, come on, party with me, because I've just found my lost sheep. Come on, nachos for everybody, you know? And they have a great time. It's really kind of a picture of heaven. That's why Jesus says in the next verse, verse 7, he says, in the same way, there's more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous in heaven straight away. In Luke chapter 19, verse number 10, Jesus said this of himself. He said, the Son of Man, Jesus, he came to seek and to save those who are lost. Now, let me pause for just a moment here. Let's just talk about lostness for a little bit. Maybe you're lost today, and you just wandered into church like, there's nothing to watch on TV. I'm bored. There's cute girls at church. Somebody promised me a meal. I don't know. And here you are. Or maybe you can remember the time in your life when you were lost. I was lost once. When I was a child, I was really, really young. And I grew up here in Williston. Nobody got that joke. That's just there, you know. I grew up here in Williston, North Dakota. I'm a Williston native. My life was so much the same as many of yours. I was an only child to a single parent. And when I was 7 years old, my mother married, and instantly I had a brother and 3 sisters. Church was always a part of the weekly diet. I cannot remember a Sunday growing up as a kid when we were not in church. I grew up in a moral family. We prayed the common table prayer before every meal. Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest, and let these gifts to us be blessed. And Sunday came and Sunday went. And I can remember the older I got, even as a kid, but more so when I got older, it's like you just dreaded Sundays because it was so boring. My mother was the organist for the church and the secretary, and my dad often counted the offering. In short, what I'm saying is we were the first ones to church and the last ones to leave until I got old enough that I could start walking home. I grew up on 807 West 19th Street. That's where I grew up. That's where I spent most of my years growing up. A pretty normal home. But the thing about church as I got older was that it just seemed like the church had all of the information but none of the inspiration. And each Sunday, information was disseminated to us, and this guy stood up there and would talk about all this information, but it was so irrelevant to real life. And so for an hour on Sunday, we all acted a certain way, and we wore different kinds of clothes. But the moment we walked out the door and for the rest of the week, there was no translation of that information into everyday life. The older I got, I just thought, I just don't want to go anymore. I didn't know I was lost, and that's the thing about when you're lost, you don't know that you're lost until you know that you're lost, right? And I think that's the same way in the illustration Jesus gives about sheep. You know what sheep know? There's some green grass over there. I'll go eat some of that. That looks good. And then pretty soon all the green grass is gone, and you go look for some more green grass. So then you find some more green grass. That looks pretty good. Pretty soon you're lost. And a lost sheep is in a lot of danger, and that's the same case for you and I in our life. And so as I got into high school, I thought, I just kind of pressed this a little bit. I just pressed it a little bit. I'm probably a senior in high school, and I just decided one Saturday night, I'm not going to get up and go to church tomorrow. And let's just see how it flies. And it did. And pretty soon it was easy just not to go to church anymore. I graduated high school. I mean, I grew up in this home that was a moral home. In fact, there's a lot of things I didn't do for fear that if my parents ever found it. I mean, I wanted to do things. I wanted to do things. I had desires in my life, and there were certain things that I did do, but I lived this triple life like everybody does. All of the students in this place can relate to this. There's the life that your parents sees. There's the life that your friends can see, and then there's the life that you have all by yourself. And it can take a lot of effort to manage those three things individually. And there's so much conflict on the inside. And there was things I would do that obviously my parents still don't know about today, and I'm not going to tell them about it because it really doesn't matter. But I graduated high school, and I moved to northeastern Iowa to go to college, and while I was there, I discovered, you know what? I can give in to my inhibitions. There is nobody here to watch over me, and I can do maybe what I've always wanted to do. And I was there for not 6 weeks probably in Waterloo, Iowa, and I moved in with a woman 10 years my senior who had 2 children. We lived as a husband and wife for more than a year, in essence, living under the roof of the house that she already had. And I can remember the conflict that I felt on the inside because I'm doing what my flesh wants to do. I'm living the way my flesh wants to live. But in my mind, I know that I'm not living right. I remember just suffering with colitis for so much because I was just a bundle of nerves on the inside. I came home the summer after my first year, much to the chagrin of that relationship, because I was so conflicted. So conflicted. And I can remember just being tied up in knots trying to keep that life separate from my life back in Williston, North Dakota. I ended up back in Waterloo in the fall, and I moved back in again and tried to resume life the way it had been again, until one day a letter shows up in the mail from my mother. My mother never wrote me letters. But in this letter she said, because I went back way before school began, and she says, I have long suspected that you've been living with this woman, but I didn't want to say anything to you because I didn't want to force you to lie to me. It's like Mom knew. I mean, I was born out of wedlock, so I think Mom must have understood the conflict. And I remember reading that letter and weeping. And at the bottom, she just said, love, Mom. And that was all it took. And I said, nope, I changed that. Now, I didn't change my lifestyle. I moved out, but I didn't change my lifestyle. Because when I moved to Iowa, you know what I learned? I learned that I loved to drink. I mean, not water, the other stuff, you know? And I loved to drink, I loved to party, I loved women, and I loved drinking, and I loved it all, and I loved everything that went along with it. And then it became really kind of awkward. I remember my graduation from college, and I remember we kind of had a little after-graduation party just for the photography department, because that's what I was in. I got a degree in commercial photography. If you know me and you know I've got a sight impairment, like how can a blind guy be a photographer? We just work it out, right? Is the camera pointing at you? You know, that whole kind of thing. Okay. Anyway, so I remember we kind of had this after-graduation party, and I was so embarrassed because I'm trying to keep my Iowa life, my college life, my single life separate from my home life with my parents. And I remember the professor for one of the departments, he's trying to tap a keg of beer. And my parents are sitting at a table with me, and finally, this guy, Mr. Fox, he turns to me and goes, Walstad, come and tap this keg. You're a pro at this. I don't want to be a pro right now. And I just remember that awkward feeling. And then I get back to Williston, and how am I going to live and this whole kind of thing. I got a job working at the Williston Herald and did stuff for them, taking pictures for them and working in the darkroom and that whole kind of thing. While I am there working at this, I'm still doing my party life. There was another person that worked there. Her name was Janine. Janine worked there. She worked in the back, and I just remember the impression was that Janine is a loudmouth, and she's always drinking. I mean, she drank on the job. She always had alcohol in her breath. She's just this kind of this wild, crazy person. And then later on, I got another job. I started working at a place called the Breakaway Lounge. The Breakaway Lounge was a huge nightclub in Williston, located out near Walmart. It's gone now. And I'm working out there, and I'll tell you, when you love to drink, there's no better place to work than in a bar. It was just awesome, you know. But here's what's going on in my whole life. I'm so lost. And everything that I thought was fun and fulfilling, be it wine or women. It was never wine, but just those two go together, that kind of thing. But it just started to kind of fall apart. And it had no value, no meaning, no fulfillment anymore. I didn't know really where to turn. In fact, I remember being home alone and just thinking, there's got to be an answer. But my church doesn't have it. My church doesn't have it. Maybe the Catholics have the answer. Maybe the Mormons know because they've got really good TV commercials. Maybe I need to go to the Episcopalian church. I'm telling you, inside all of us, there is this hole. There is a vacuum inside of us, and nothing completes the vacuum except Jesus. Only I didn't know that. Well, the Breakaway Lounge job, that just starts like, nobody's going to the bar anymore. Just that wasn't fulfilling, and whole kind of things going on. I've got this other job working at the Herald. One day, Margot, the managing editor, she says to me, you know, there's a girl that works here that's kind of got an interest in you. Oh, really? Yeah, you know, unholy thoughts. Yeah, her name's Janine. I'm going, Janine? Like, who's Janine? Yeah, she just works in the next room. And I go over and I kind of peek around the corner of the next room. Here's this girl with all this little curly hair and glasses and this little white cardigan sweater, just typing away at a computer. Like, so I went and asked her out, and she said, no. And later she said, okay. And so we get together. In fact, this is on, I think, January 26, 1986. It's the day the Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded. We go out that night to a little restaurant in Williston called Trapper's Kettle. And we're sitting down across the table, and Janine starts telling me about Jesus. Well, she didn't have to tell me about Jesus. I grew up in the church. And she's telling me about a relationship with him, and I don't remember the details of the conversation. I just remember my broken logic. I said, look, I'm a Christian because I believe in God. I remember moving to Bozeman, Montana because of another girl. A lot of problems in my life with girls. Good thing I got married to the right one, you know. And I remember this group of Christians being in there, and I walked by this table, and they're trying to hand out literature, and they say, do you know who Jesus is? And I'm like, yeah. Because I'd grown up in the church. And so Janine's telling me about church and about Jesus and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, you don't have to tell me about this because I grew up in the church. And listen. I believe I'm a Christian. And I try to do good. And I said, I pray every night. And I did. But I said, listen, I only think God is upset with me. And this was my logical thinking. God's only mad at me for drinking when I'm too drunk to pray. That was my thinking. That was on a Tuesday. Nothing really happened. I'm sure Janine went home and thought, oh, God. There ain't no hope for that boy. And that was on a Tuesday. We got together again on Friday, and I think we probably just watched some TV together. I don't remember. And then I decided, well, if I want to hang out with this girl, you know what I got to do? I got to go to church with her. So I said, well, can I go to church with you? And she said, yeah. Now, I didn't go in the morning. They used to have an evening service at this church because I didn't want to go in the morning because I had my church in the morning. I didn't attend it, but I had it, you know. And so I put on my gray slacks and my white shirt and my tie and a blue sport coat. I didn't know how you're supposed to dress. So I go. And I come to this building, and this building is nondescript. There's not even a cross on the outside of it. And I remember as we walked in, it was like, well, this looks really different on the inside. It doesn't look even churchy. And they gave me this bulletin. And the bulletin didn't even look churchy because all of the bulletins I was used to were flowery on the front and had some scripture on there. This one was just like, had some image there, and it said, the church without walls. Like, I said, is this a special service that they have a bulletin like this? She goes, yeah. We get inside the sanctuary, and worship begins. I experienced things I'd never seen before. This was a high-tech church because the lights dimmed. The worship leader would lead songs, and they had a projection screen and a slide projector. Google it if you don't know what it is, right? And it projected these pictures up there, and underneath the picture would have the lyrics to the song that you're singing. It was like, whoa, this is high-tech stuff. And I remember as worship began, I felt something I had never felt in a church before, and I just began to just weep and cry. It's like, what is the matter with me? Get it together. But I felt, and sensed in worship that there really was a God who could be personal with me. It was amazing, and I had such a change of heart. I mean, I was a mess, and I was crying, and the snot and all that kind of stuff going along with it. I was just bawling through the whole thing, and the rest of the service. And I remember while worship's going on, we get to the end of worship, and I'm standing there, I'm Mr. Lutheran boy, and all of a sudden, this lady starts saying something that I'd never heard before. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to explain it. And she gets done making her noises. And then somebody else in the church, they said something in English. And I'm like, well, this never happened in the Lutheran church I grew up in. But it was so amazing. It just bore witness with what's going on inside me. Meanwhile, Janine is standing next to me. She's praying this prayer. Oh, God, please don't let anything weird go on tonight in church. Please, no tongues, no interpretation. Please, God, nothing, because I don't want Chris to get scared. She didn't know how God was wrecking me and messing me up on the inside. And then somebody had a special. They used to do specials. I don't know why they were called special, because they did them every week. There was nothing special about them, right? And they sang in this microphone, and then somebody hit a button in the back, and you could hear through speakers, and then this music started to play. It was a cassette tape. If you don't know what a cassette tape is, Google it. All right. And then somebody sang in this microphone along with the music. I'm like, this church is so high-tech. I've never been in a place like this. This is amazing. And then the pastor gets up and he preaches a sermon on this girl named Rahab who was a prostitute. If anything could go wrong in the service for somebody to come to know Jesus, it all went wrong that night. But see, here's what you need to know. The whole time my life is falling apart, I had an uncle who came to faith in Jesus. And he had been inviting me to church. But more than that, he had been praying for me. Can I share a verse with you out of James 5:16? Look at this. The earnest prayers of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. Here I am today. Now, let me tell you some more of the story. This is just kind of amazing. Not long after I come to faith in Jesus, there's this guy that comes walking into the church, and he's just, back in the pastor would say, anybody got something they want to share? He'd stand up, that whole kind of thing. And I'm going through a divorce, and my life is a wreck, and this is going on, but I know God's going to get me through, and all that kind of stuff. His name was Dave. And then life just kind of goes on. Life moves on. Nothing happened. I mean, Janine just kind of went her way, and I went my way, and that was on coincidentally, what is today's date? Say it with me. Today is February 2nd, 2020. Coincidentally, that evening service took place on February 2nd, 1986. I'm 34 today, and I look good, don't I? Look good. Okay. About the same time I come to faith in Jesus, there's a little girl in another state who's got her own searching going on, her own dilemmas, her own difficulties and challenges. And just like not even a month and a half, 6 weeks later, she moves to Williston, North Dakota to become the assistant manager at Bonanza Family Restaurant. Ding, 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 ding. There you go, right? Salad bar, steak, and all the shrimp you can eat, right? So I met this girl in January of 1987. She was the assistant manager, and I'm picking up jobs, and so I started cleaning Bonanza at night, and then during the day, I was bussing tables, and this little girl was my boss. Her name was Robin. And I would sit down at the store at night and talk to Robin because Robin was in outpatient drug treatment during the day. Yeah, your pastor's wife was a druggie. Just saying, okay? All right. We've been there, done that, whole kind of thing. And I kind of did some, I am so out of time. All right. Kind of missionary dated, long story short, we get married. Obviously, we kind of get married, but let me tell you about the wonderful things that happen as a result of prayer. We started working with youth, worked with youth for 3.5 years in this church, went to Bible college, came back here and served as a youth pastor for a time, and then left this church, went to another community, was there for 14 years. We came back here in June of 2010, almost 10 years ago. Our son has now graduated a master's program. He's trying to raise up other people to be solid in their biblical doctrine. I stand here with the great privilege of telling you about Jesus week after week. I'm telling you the earnest prayers of a righteous person can accomplish much. It's amazing the power and the impact of the prayers of that one person. So we come back in 2010, standing in the worship team behind me back then was this guy named Dave, who married Janine, the gal that invited me to church. Dave, when I was working in the bar, was on the other side of the bar in a band called Sniper. Boy, doesn't that sound awesome, right? And Dave and Janine are now in the worship team of the church that I pastor. 3 children, Tim, Christina, and Jonathan. This morning, Tim's standing up here leading you in 2 songs. Their son Jonathan's back there. God does amazing things, church. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's incredible. Now, let me ask you something. We're going to quit here. What about you? This is 2020, and so hence the theme, 1 in 20. Here's my challenge to you. Here's my vision for you. Here's my goal for you. Here's my challenge for you. Will you aim at one person, not a family, not an apartment complex, not the trailer court, not the city, one person. Will you purpose in yourself, not the 2 of you, you individually purpose to make an impact, a difference, and a change in just one person's life in 2020? Can you invite them to church? Can you pray for that person? Can you invest some time in them? Can you express and show the love of Jesus to them? I know the answer to all of those questions. Yes! One. Will you go after one person in 20 and see what God will do? The other challenge I have for you in this church this year, will you get involved in one ministry this year? One ministry this year. Don't be the casual observer. Don't be the one that just takes. Be the one that gives back. If God has done anything for you, give back to what God has done for you. You can stand and hand out a piece of paper at the back door back here and smile at somebody. You can shake a hand. How many of you have ever clicked the mouse before? Raise your hand. You can be in the tech booth. It's amazing. How many of you know what a diaper is? You can change a diaper. You can love a student on Wednesday nights. You can make a difference. Will you involve yourself in one ministry in 2020? And then finally, as a result of impacting one life and getting involved in one ministry, here's what I want to tell you about. I'm excited to just publicly announce this whole thing, that on the 9th of September, our plan is to add one more service because we have to. Because of the agendas of people and the schedules of people, and because so many people are being impacted by you people and by Robin and by me, we have to add another service. So on Wednesday nights, we've already kind of launched the bridge. You've been to the bridge, you know what it's all about. But we want to add worship to that. We want to reach more families, more souls, and more lives. One more service, one person, one ministry, one more service. Why? Because God places so much value in the soul. Look at Luke 6:31. It says this, do to others what you would like them to do to you. I would just illustrate it this way. Think of it this way. You are in a maze. You cannot see over the walls. You cannot see to the end, but you want to get out of the confusion of this maze. And you're not the only one in the maze. There's hundreds of other people trying to get out. They're trying to get out. Along the way, as you keep searching for the door to get out of this maze, you meet so many other people that are just like you. They're lost. But they're great people, they're nice people, they're confused people. They're people who've been discouraged with life, who've gone through brokenness in their life, and you meet them. Finally the day comes, and you find the exit, and you get out of the maze, and you get out of the maze, you're like, I found it, I'm free. Wouldn't you want to help other people find what you just found? Do to others what you would want them to do to you. Far be it from us to withhold the hope that we have, the promises that we have, the love that we've discovered. I'm telling you today in 2020, will you make an impact in the life of just one? This year, will you invest in that one person, that one ministry? Pray for that one to add that one additional service. Maybe you're the one that God has been pursuing. You're in this place today, and God's been chasing your heart. I'm going to give you the opportunity to say, yes, I'll follow. I want to be involved in what God's doing and have an impact in the lives of so many others.